Welcome back, everyone, to A to Z Podcast, an Ultraman podcast where we talk about everything Ultraman under the sun. I am John and Orgime, and I am joined as always by my lovely co-host.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Swooce, the science scientist, the madman without a plan, and the doctor of disaster. And today we are going to be discussing the one, the only, the ultramist of ultras, Ultraman Orb.
That's right. Today is our first discussion episode. We're going to talk about Ultraman Orb and everything pertaining to it. So because this is our first time doing a discussion type episode, we want to warn our listeners that if you are sensitive to spoilers, maybe watch this episode before, or watch the series before listening to this episode.
Yeah, we are going to be going over everything. So if you don't want to hear how it ends, don't listen.
Right. And also, I don't really like doing a non-spoiler review before a spoiler section like other podcasts do, because people consider spoilers differently. Like, what I think isn't a spoiler, some person else might consider to be a spoiler. So
He's
to
talking about
prevent
me.
from yes, I am talking about you. But to avoid anyone getting upset that we accidentally spoiled a part of a show for them, just in general with our discussion episodes, go ahead and watch the show before listening to the episode if you care about spoilers at all. Specifically with Swooce here, me and him, we disagree on what constitutes a spoiler quite a lot.
Yes, we've had problems in the past where he'll show me something and I'm like, dude, but why?
Yeah, and it was completely unintentional because I'm like, oh, look at this, and I consider this news, while he considers it a spoiler.
And mostly what we're referring to is like when a character's getting a new form, I like to organically see the form in the show. Like the first time I know it exists is like when it shows up. And well, that's not always possible, especially if you want to buy products.
Right.
And in those times it's like, well, it is what it is. If you want to buy it, you got to know the toy's coming, and if you don't, you won't be able to get it. Them's the breaks for buying foreign.
Yeah, and also for Tokusatsu specifically, they do these magazines like Terebi-kun and other magazines like that. There's more than just one. But they basically show this is what's happening this month in Toku. And they show you scans of part of the episodes. This new form is debuting next week. This new toy is coming out in 2 weeks. And it's a way of like marketing what's coming out that month to build hype. But to me, I'm like, oh, cool. But Swooce here,
And I was like, no, I don't want to know about it. It doesn't exist until it happens in the show.
Exactly. So just to avoid any kind of problems with spoilers in general.
Here's your spoiler now tag. Be warned,
Exactly.
It's coming.
Yeah. And you've had enough time to leave here at this point if you don't want to be spoiled. So we'll just jump into it. To start off, I'm going to give like a quick synopsis of Orb, and then we'll jump into what we thought about it.
Yeah.
So Ultraman Orb started airing on July 9th of 2016, and it was to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Ultraman as well as the 20th anniversary of Ultraman Tiga, exactly 5 years ago. So our titular hero, Kurenai Guy, appears as a wanderer with a mysterious past. We later discover that he has lost his power as an Ultra, and he turns into a new Ultra by fusing the powers of two previously existing Ultras.
Well, we find out later. It's literally the first episode where that's talked about.
Yeah, that's true. But we have our point of view human characters working at the SSP,
The
something
something
search
search people.
That's right. Headed by Naomi, as her friends call her Cap. We are also joined with Jeddah and Shin, her compatriots. They run a conspiracy blog reporting on all things supernatural.
And they're there to help you fill out the meat of the show, give you other characters and help move the plot along. They're your self-insert so you can feel related to what you're watching.
Right. Your point of view character.
Yes, that.
Yeah. So we also meet Naomi's uncle Shibukawa. He's a member of the VTL, which is the actual Science Patrol style organization in this universe. For the first time, or I'm not entirely sure if it's the first time, but in this series, we don't actually have a point of view on the inside of the Science Patrol, but yet we can see them operating from outside.
Yeah, it's true. Like, other than really him, isn't there like one other agent, or am I thinking of something different now? No, I know what I'm thinking of, and I'm thinking of Jeed.
Yeah, you're thinking of Jeed.
Yeah. Okay, so no, but Nora was like, he's like our only view in, and for the most part, we really don't even see what they do in the whole show. Now, it is talked about, and there is actually an episode that's a day in the life of him, so we can see what he normally does and what the organization's about. But largely, it's just, well, they're a factor in this world, and we know they exist.
Right. So, the series is basically structured like any other Ultra series and other Toku in general, where there's like a kaiju or monster of the week, and these Ultras have sealed away the monsters, so as Guy is able to take down these monsters, he gains the power of that
the Ultra that sealed him or beat him.
That sealed it away, as well as freeing that spirit for his antagonist to gain the power of. So the antagonist, named Juggless Juggler,
best villain ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, so we see him going through the series and gaining more powers of other kaiju, and we are later told that his goal is to revive Mago Orochi.
And he uses a weapon or a tool that's essentially the exact same thing that our main hero uses to transform, but like an evil version.
Right. So we'll get into that when we talk about gimmicks and stuff like that, but just in general, what was your general impressions, your first reactions, your just general thoughts as a whole on this series?
Oh, well, if you recall, during the first episode, the first time I tried to watch Orb, I got like 2 or 3 episodes in, and I was like, okay. Remember? It was like, I didn't get that far, and then I was like, I'm not sure if Ultraman's for me.
Right.
But that being said, I did circle back to it eventually, and I watched through it, and it was very enjoyable. Mostly my first reaction, I liken to like not being sold on the show yet, and I don't know, in the back of my head trying to resist watching it.
Right.
But like once it came out, like it was very good. The plot, like all the characters really associate well with each other. Like it doesn't feel like any of the characters are overshadowed for what they do. Like even like the more or less insignificant background characters that are reoccurring, like they're very important. Like in the show, like you actually feel like you know them and you want them to do well in what they're doing. Heck, even the villain, like even when you want him to lose, it's like, but he's a good villain though.
Yeah, I completely get that. Yeah, I also really enjoyed the show. It was the first Ultraman series that I watched, and it was basically what sparked this whole thing in me that allowed me to get into Ultraman. And the characters in other Toku, I find these types of characters really annoying. But
With
in
the
this
over the top
show,
energetic ones.
yeah, like the over the top, they're like really hamming the scene, if you know what that means. But like they're just a very big presence in the scene.
Right.
You know, like they're over the top. But in other toku, I would find these characters like really annoying and just wanting them to leave the scene. But in this show, it's completely the opposite. Something about these characters. Now it might take a couple episodes to kind of get used to them, but there's just something so endearing about these three friends.
Yeah, I think what it might be is like even though they're over the top, somehow it feels more genuine. I don't know. I think they got
Yeah.
the formula just right this time. Like not that they always do. They still have over the top characters in other ultras that are like they're still annoying. You know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, but
like this time, it's very much like feels like oh, I could see like going there and hanging out with these folks. They're all like cool people and they're very into what they're about, and that's it creates a fun place to be.
yeah, and I think what you said there, where they feel genuine, I think that's the best descriptor of what I'm trying to say. Is these three characters, specifically Naomi, Jin, and or Shin and Jeddah, they feel so genuine. They're genuine friends. They genuinely care about each other, and they have really good chemistry with each other. And when they're interacting with each other, you just feel at home. Like you feel like you're with your friends, and you get sucked into the scene.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
Yeah, and as far as when they meet Guy, that really changes the dynamic between them, but it's very much in an interesting way.
Yeah, because even when he shows up, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was saying, like, even when he shows up, like, it doesn't change the dichotomy of the group. It's just like, oh, well, he just fits in. Like, he's another piece of the puzzle that you didn't even know you were putting together.
Exactly.
And like, even though like he doesn't really change in the way he acts, it's like, well, now I couldn't see him in like the group without him.
Exactly. Yeah. So, any other general general thoughts you had about the show that you want to drop here?
General thoughts. No, I don't think, not like without getting into anything too specific. I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. So, what about the theme song?
Theme song?
Let's talk about the theme song for a minute.
Okay, so let's see. Orb's theme song was that one, right? I'm trying to like think of exactly which one was his now, because they're all good, but my memory when it comes to music is crap. The only one I can actively know is off the top of my head is the Ginga one.
Oh, okay.
But I think
so I guess what you could say, your general idea on the theme song is good but forgettable.
It's hard to say it's forgettable when the one I compared it to is the most memorable one to me.
Okay.
It's not that it's forgettable, it's just I think I know which one it is, and it's good. It has like the yeah, okay, so it is the one I'm thinking of. It's a little harder to remember.
Sorry for the singing people, I can't sing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not my favorite style of singing. Like the very like deep long chords, that they kind of sing in. But it's like it's not a bad theme song. I liked it. And it really is appropriate for the character of Guy and like the way he speaks and acts,
Right.
Like it's very on brand for like who Orb is as a character. So I completely get it. I think it fits in well. And it, like I said, it's pretty good. Rating it on a scale of, well, let's say 1 to 5, I'd probably give it maybe about 3.5, 4.
Okay. Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily say it's one of my favorites, but I definitely really enjoy this theme song. I specifically with Ultraman theme songs, there's not one I dislike. I just generally like the direction that they take with their music, and some I like more than others, but there's generally not one that I completely dislike. Um, but specifically, another musical thing is how Guy uses his orbnica, I think is how they call it. Basically, they
Is what?
combine the word orb and the harmonica, the little thing he always
Oh
plays.
yeah, the harmonica. That it doesn't have any actual plot relevance other than he just played music a lot, right?
I mean, it had part of a plot relevance that we'll get into later, but that's specifically the tune he was playing has plot relevance.
Yeah, the tune has relevance, but the harmonica
Right.
itself isn't that important, I don't think, is it?
No, not really. I mean, there's some backstory on it way in non-created material that we'll talk about later.
Oh,
That
that's
whole
true.
10-part thing.
Yeah. Well, we will get into that later, but that's a whole chunk of this conversation, so we'll circle back around.
Yeah, that'll probably be another episode because of how much is in that. But um
We'll
yeah,
talk.
so that harmonica tune that he plays, I really enjoyed that. And they did a like actual produced version of that song that I listened to, and that's a really good tune.
Yeah, it's a fun tune. Like, and it's the tune itself is so relevant that I guess can we say this now, or should we hold off on saying what it relates to?
Yeah, we'll hold that on to talking about story elements.
Okay. Well, I was more talking about without giving it away. I was talking about how it relates to the sword.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about that for toy gimmicks.
All right.
But let's go ahead and move into power ups first.
Okay. Well, heck, it's in the same vein, so we'll circle back to that momentarily. So I guess with
Right,
power ups, I guess what we need to start with is what they use to transform. So in this series, they used cards, right?
right.
But in the main object that they used was something called the orb ring, which essentially was like this little a ring that looked like the ring that's on his chest, and it had a little handle, and you put the card in the middle, and I guess it reads the card somehow.
Yeah, there's a NFC chip inside the card. The card is thicker than a normal like Yu-Gi-Oh card or Pokemon card or whatever kind of trading card you would associate with cards. It's a little bit thicker than that because it has a NFC chip, almost like an amiibo card.
Okay. All right.
Very similar to an amiibo card. So it's got an NFC chip inside it, and it is able to read the information on that chip.
Okay. That's how that works. And then but also like I said before, and he has one, and there's two of these. There's the orb ring, and then there's the dark orb ring. And the one owner, of course, of the dark orb ring is Juggler.
That's right.
And essentially they function a little bit differently. The dark orb ring is used to summon kaiju, but it doesn't just summon kaiju. Do we
Are
want
you referring to Zapondon?
Zapon? Yeah, I'm talking about Zapondon.
Yeah.
Essentially, Juggler he has his own form, but he never really fights in it. Like we see him fighting it like a little bit, but he's actually just a what we would say an average sized dude for us. Like even when he transforms, he's still our size. So like when he fights using kaiju,
Right.
but not just regular kaiju's. Being in the orb ring, it fuses them together as well, and gives him different forms.
Yeah. I think he only really does the fusion like once because it's G that really goes heavy into the fusion kaiju.
I mean, he does Five Kings once, doesn't he?
Yeah, but I mean technically Five King is well actually I don't know if he does Five King and Orb. I know he does it in Zet, but I don't know if he does Five King and Orb. But Five King specifically is technically a fusion, but it's been
Well, it's not one
it's
of his
from
though.
it's an old one. It's not like a new thing. It's an older kaiju that he its fusion existed prior to this, is what I'm saying.
Right. Like, heck, it was in. I think Five Kings was in Ginga, wasn't it?
I think it was prior to that.
Even prior to that. Well,
I
that's
don't
the
know.
oldest thing I've seen with it in it.
I know for sure it's in Ginga, but I don't know entirely how far back that goes. I'd have to double check. But yeah, I don't think Five King actually shows up in Orb. Yeah,
Is he in Orb? Oh,
I don't think he is.
yeah, I think we're. I just think we're thinking of other things because. Oh shoot! I just realized what we did.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. You're good. Yeah, we could talk about the caliber real quick.
Caliber.
Yeah, Orb caliber.
All right. Do we want to just go ahead and then go into that one?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and then we'll double back to this forms.
Okay. So the Orb caliber, largely for plot relevance, it isn't that important. It's more important in the auxiliary content that comes later. But thematically, when he uses it, and this is how it relates to the song, like when it's activated, it plays the tune that he plays on his harmonica.
Right. Well, I would say it's actually very important plot related because that's what gives him his true form.
This is true. So we mentioned before that Orb loses or starts the show without his power, and it's also very interesting, I think, because this is actually his final form for the show. Is his base form. That's something that's completely different from really any type of Toku type show. You don't end on the base form. Well, I mean, I guess you do if you're Orb, though.
Right. Yeah. So we'll let's go ahead and talk about these forms real quick.
Sure. So first form is
the first form is Specium Zepidium. It's a fusion of Ultraman and Ultraman Tiga. And these two specifically are chosen as the base form fusions is because, like I said earlier, Orb is used to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Ultraman as well as the 20th anniversary of Tiga. So by using both of those as his base form, it's a celebration of both.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I always kind of wondered how they pick which one goes with which. And mostly I was like, I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to enjoy show.
Right. Well, I don't know if the other ones have specific reasons, but this one, that's the reason. So he's got elements of both Tiga and Ultraman, as well as primarily evidently looking like Orb himself, you know?
Yeah. Like there's always the element that looks like him in there.
That's right. So he's got purple in his suit to come from Tiga. And I really like this suit.
I mean, really, you could say any Ultraman has elements of Ultraman on it, so...
Yeah.
Arguably speaking.
Yeah. So, his second form is Burnmite, which is a fusion of Mebius and Taro. He's got big horns on his head like Taro.
Dobium Dynamite!
That's right.
That's his attack. I really like that form, because he just charges into folks and then explodes.
That's right.
Like that attack makes no sense as to how it should be effective, but I love it because it's over the top and ridiculous.
And that attack is definitely a reference to Taro's attack because he always does that dynamite attack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's the thing though. Their attacks are, or his attack is related to at least one of them, because I think his laser when he uses Spacium Imperium is Spacium Kozin, right?
Well, yeah, but Coulson means like beam.
Beam laser.
Yeah. But yeah, so we move on to his third form, Hurricane Slash, which is my favorite of these three because it's a fusion of Ultraman Jack and Zero.
Yeah, and of course Zero being your favorite.
Exactly. So he gets the two sluggers on the top of his head like Zero, and he's got this lance weapon, which is it's to emulate the Jack's spear, and
Mhm.
Zero gets a spear from Jack in one of his films. So it's to emulate that weapon.
But it also has like an orb in it that like as for the purpose of a toy, like there's like a little thing that you can hold down and it'll like spin the orb. It's neat.
Right. Yeah, it's a toy.
It's a toy.
It's a thing. Yeah, so these are his like 3 base forms, because especially with this era of Ultraman, you'll start and he'll have like 3 main forms that he goes in between.
Yeah, cluster of like starting forms. But then from there it's all like, well, it's just a power creep from here.
Right. So these 3 are usually on the same power level, and then
They just do different things and they look cool.
Exactly. So his first like power upgrade would be Thunder Breaster, which was a fusion of Zophie and Belial. So
which this is the first time they've used like, well, I mean, it's not like they've done the using other ultra powers before, but this is like the first time that they used, I think, darkness, right, as a power.
Yeah, so this is the first time we've used fusions as like the show gimmick, but there have been fusions before. Specifically, like Saga's coming to mind, the fusion with Cosmos and Justice, or
that's true.
That comes to mind. I think it was Legend, I think is what it's called. I think it was Ultraman Legend. But so fusions existed prior, but this is the first time where the show's built around it, and it definitely won't be the last.
No, I believe this thematic is here to stay at this point.
Yeah. Because it sells, you know?
It does.
Toys, and it's fun. But yeah, so it's a fusion of Belial's power and Zophie. So the light and dark. So each of these cards for these Ultramen have like a different elemental power like associated with them, and this one's like light and darkness fusing together. So it's the chaos energy of that. And this is what is ultimately a berserk form.
Yeah, he couldn't control this at first, I don't think.
Right. This is it's gotten more common in Kamen Rider. It's gotten more it's appeared more often in Kamen Rider here recently.
It has.
Where they get a form that they can't control, and then they either get another upgrade to control that power, or they just learn to control it.
Well, that only happened once. The getting another upgrade to control the power.
Oof. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
Right. Anyway.
Yeah. Spoilers and whatnot. So Thunder Breaster, he is a lot more bulky, you know. He's got like, they built the suit to be a little bit more bulky.
He skipped leg day.
He definitely skipped leg day, but
he also gets the lanky.
I was gonna say it's that suit build that was later incorporated with Titus and Taiga, where he's like, it's the muscles are built into the suit, you know?
Right. It's like lots of extra padding to emulate muscle, and it looks good, really. Like, I like it, and like they refined it more too. Like Titus, I think it really works for him.
Yeah. I don't know if this was. I would say this is probably the first time they did that, because I can't think of another form where they use like faux muscles to build up bulk.
I don't think so. Like, I think they did it again in Geed, but that's after.
Right. This is, I think, the earliest. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me. But I think this is the earliest of where they use a big suit, or they build up the suit to look more muscular.
Yeah.
It's got a larger profile.
Bigger build in general.
Yeah. So that's really cool. I like that suit a lot. And then his last form, as we spoke, was Orb Origin. And having a final form be like a base form is something completely foreign to us, coming from like Kamen Rider and Tokusatsu, because they like to escalate the power levels.
Yeah. I mean, technically there's one kind of half exception where this has happened in Rider, but that was recent, and I didn't like the way they did it.
Are you talking about 01?
I'm talking about 01, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. But as far as Orb Origin is concerned, that's a nice suit. It's clean. It looks really good. And as a hindsight, you can tell, oh, yeah, so this is the base orb that the fusion forms are built on top of.
Right. Like, it's something that's like, if even if you like as soon as you see it, you're like, oh yeah, I can see it, how it relates to every single other form now.
Yeah, and they did a really good job of making his forms cohesive. And they feel real related. I think some forms later on don't necessarily look cohesive with
the base form.
That same Ultra's other forms, you know.
Yeah. Like once again, like relating to Jeed, a lot of the times his forms, like when he gets the fusion, it's like, well, I can't see how the powers he's borrowing from relates to his current form at all. But you can still usually see his base form in there, usually.
Yeah. But yeah, so he is able to regain his origin form by using the Orb Caliber, which, let's talk a little bit more about the Orb Caliber.
Right.
It's a sword that has a big old circle in the middle of it. And the side of the circle is a wheel that he's able to turn, and it selects one of 4 elements, and he uses an elemental attack from it.
Which Ultraman typically sticks to the 4 base element principle of fire, water, wind, and earth.
Right.
You know, it's very commonplace when you're doing elemental division, but they also have like light and dark, but primarily it's just those 4.
Yeah, so this weapon's really cool. I like it, and it's not too common. It's gotten more common since, but for a long time, it's not very common to see an Ultra wielding a sword.
Yeah, at most they used to get like the Slugger, right?
Yeah, especially with the older stuff. But I really enjoy watching them implement like sword fighting into the traditional Ultraman choreography.
Yeah, I think the closest we really get is like we got like a powered up Slugger, I think, from Ginga, right? Maybe.
Well, let me think.
No, I'm not even think. No, that was from X, not Ginga.
Yeah, that was X,
and it was only slightly bigger. It wasn't even like a lot bigger. We couldn't really call it a sword.
If we want to get technical, Victory gets a sword, and the X movie form has a sword. But in general, yes, this is kind of in the early aspects of having Ultras use swords.
Yeah.
But in general, I really like the look of it. Some people don't necessarily like the way it looks, and here let me go on a tangent real quick.
Okay. So what about?
As far as weapon toys for Tokusatsu, there's actual laws written saying that a toy sword cannot extend a period of length.
And it's not very long at all.
It's not very long.
Like your toy sword is like a dagger, essentially.
Let me equate this to an American law where if you have a toy gun, it has to have a orange tip on it to prove it's a toy gun.
And also there's laws that have to like how strong the spring can be.
Exactly. So in general, with these kinds of toys, America can get really cool sword toys because they're not they can do the full length. They're not
Limited by that.
beholden to that, but the guns tend to look really crappy and cheap. On the reverse, the Japanese guns, like for when a Sentai has a gun changer, gun morpher, the gun prop is usually really, really good sized. It's big, it's bulky, and even though it's meant for a child, it's large enough that it's not dinky to an adult collector. But when it comes to sword toys, they're always like
Very small.
really, really tiny.
Like, yeah, if you actually have seen the show, like what we're literally saying is like Orb, like when he transforms using the Orb caliber, like he has like literally like what looks like a miniaturized version of it, but that's the actual toy, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm getting at. So like for Sentai and Kamen Rider, fans are always upset by the roleplay weapons because they can never be the size that they are in the show. But what I really enjoy about this for Ultraman is when the Ultra is in that like headspace where they're transforming.
Yeah, Ultra Space.
Yeah, in that Ultra space, or when he's got the Orb caliber before he's transforming, he's holding the actual toy. So the prop for the show is the toy, and it's like a depowered mode. That's the way I look at it, because when he turns into an Ultra, then the Ultra has the big version.
Yeah, it doesn't even look the same.
Exactly. So I really, really enjoy how it kind of validates the toy.
Yeah, because it's like really cool, because it's like, oh, well, it's like, it doesn't even look the same, but it's like, oh, but the actor in the show, he's actually using this, and it looks just like this. So exactly. I can just pretend I'm in that state instead of pretending I'm in the big state, you know, for like if you're doing make-believe or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So specifically for the kids, I feel like it's...
Yes, that's what I was referring to.
Yeah, it helps validate.
Visualize.
Validate.
Validate? I would say visualize.
Yeah, I can't speak right now. Yeah, it helps validate that toy. And I've come to like I hear a lot that they criticize, like, some people like to criticize that they use the toys as props. They're like, that prop is crap. It looks like a toy. Like, yeah, that's the point. It is the toy. It's there to sell the toy.
And they ball on a budget, so it's okay.
Yeah, and with Ultra doing it like this, it really I like it.
Yeah, especially
I'm
like
going in circles here. I'm just gonna stop saying that, but basically my point is I like it.
Yeah, it's especially nice. Like he's like, oh well, you know, if it wasn't that way, people wouldn't complain. But then you got to think like, well, right now we're doing a Kamen Rider where their transformation weapon is a toy or a sword. I mean, and it's bad.
Yeah, it's super tiny.
It's super tiny. It doesn't look like it flows well. Like even in the show itself, you can see like when they pull it out, it even changes size in the show. I don't know how they would have thought that making that the gimmick would work out fluidly. That is a big criticism, I guess, for product for the current airing that I have. But yeah, like when you just look at the toy, it's like, well, the handle up to that part looks, I guess, normal enough. But then like even in the show, when you're having to have it change size, like it's never the size it is when it fits inside the belt. So that's my gripe on that. And like you can really like the point of that is saying, well, you can see the way that Ultra's been doing it is like, well, I completely understand why they're doing it this way, and I agree, because at least we get to see it as it is, and it never looks like, it looks a little awkward, but it's something you get over because you see it a lot more, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's like even though it looks weird, everything will become normal if you're around it long enough. So it just works, and now you can really appreciate what they did. Because even if like you look at it from the outside, saying, "Oh, that's weird," it's like, well, yeah, it's weird. Just take it face value. But like once you start to realize the reason they did it, and you can see well what it would be like if they didn't do it that way, you're like, oh yes, this was probably the right call. I can see the brilliance in what they've done.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you want to say about the toys?
Yes,
Go ahead.
vinyls are always nice.
Yeah, I like vinyls. They didn't really change too much with this series as vinyls compared to previous series. Actually, wait. Yeah, they did, because this was when they started taking out the
Spark,
live sign on the bottom of the vinyls.
yeah, they stopped doing the spark dolls.
That's right. So they took out the live sign off the bottom of the Spark dolls, and so yeah, it is actually a point to mention that they changed that. But and they also came with no, it was only the monsters that came with cards.
Oh.
The monster vinyls came with cards.
Oh, and also we were talking about how like the orb ring reads the chips in the cards. I think it's really interesting to note that the orb caliber had a chip in it as well, and literally you stick the sword into the orb ring to make it do that noise.
True. Yeah, that's true too.
I just think since we're talking about the gimmicks, that's an important thing to note.
Yeah, and collecting cards is fun. Both Swooce and I are card collectors as far as playing certain games like Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, Pokemon.
Yep.
We've
sent a
played
few folks to
all
the
of
Shadow
the
Realm.
games at once. Sorry. What'd you say?
I said I sent a few folks to the Shadow Realm.
Yeah, we've played all of those games at one point in time. I think you still play Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't play
not since socializing got killed, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But before all that happened, I stopped playing. I collect certain cards, but I don't necessarily play the games anymore. But yeah, so that being said, collecting whenever these types of shows make cards the collectible gimmick, it's always fun. Sentai's done it a few times, Kamen Rider's done it a few times.
And I think the cards could be actually used at arcades, right? Like wasn't there like an arcade game that you could read the card in and then like it would give more powers or something in the game?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what the game is called. I think actually Fusion Fight is what it was called.
Which one is Gamba Rising?
One of Gamba Rising, I think, was Sentai Rider.
Okay.
But yeah, so there's an arcade game, and every year they change it because they associate it with that current gimmick. But it's not just the cards; it was whatever that gimmick was you could use in the arcade. So like Geed capsules, you could scan a QR code on them. Well, I don't know. I don't know
medals?
about the Zet. Yeah, I guess you could do that. I'm not entirely sure, but
I mean, they didn't advertise that aspect as much this year. Once again, due to
things going on.
Yeah, things happening. We all understand why.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure if they did that or not, but just in general, they use you were able to use these whatever the gimmick was in the arcade game to make new forms or give it a power up or whatever to play the game.
And it was really neat because there ended up being lots of arcade only forms that you didn't ever see in the show.
Yeah. And we'll talk about this when we talk about Ultra Fight Orb when we get to that. But there was actually two forms that show up in that, which were originally arcade only, but because of their popularity, they became actual suits.
And one of them is my favorite orb suit.
Yeah, it's dope.
It's a good one. I really like it.
All right, so I think we've exhausted what we were going to talk about with toys. Let's go ahead and move on to characters.
Right on. So, should we start with the main man himself?
Yeah, let's start with Kurenai Guy, Ultraman Orb himself.
So, interesting thing about him is he wasn't always an Ultraman.
Yeah, we see a lot of his backstory in the prequel series, but I'm not entirely sure how much of that's actually shown in this. I think you see him getting the power, don't you?
No, I think the scene of you actually seeing him, I can't remember if that was the origin saga where you first see it or if it was in the show. It's hard to remember exactly where scenes happen once you've seen all of it.
Yeah, that's true. But regardless, for the sake of this, yeah, he acquires the ability to turn into an Ultraman. He doesn't necessarily start, and that's another distinction. So other Ultra series, you have a human host who meets an Ultraman in circumstances, and they bond or fuse to so that that Ultraman can stay on the planet. So the human character we meet is a different entity than the Ultraman itself. Now, Kurenai Guy, that's not the case. Kurenai Guy is Ultraman Orb. There's not that. There is no host.
Yeah, there was no other orb that came down and fused with him, and it's like, oh, now you're Orb too. It's like he actually just is him. Now that's not like something that was unique to Orb. It's been done before. It's been done since. It will be done again in the future.
Right.
But that is one thing that he has. That's it is a variable.
Yeah, it's of note. Very, very similar to like Ultra 7, where Dan Moriboshi is Ultra 7. That's like his human visage.
Or in more recent, how in Rube, how the two brothers are Rosso and Blue.
Yeah, but actually in that show, weren't there previous?
Well,
ones?
I mean, there were. Well, look, we'll do
Yeah,
Rube
we'll
and
get
Rube,
into that.
but but importantly, they are the Ultras though in that one.
Right, right. So same with Jeed.
Same with Jeed. Technically, not the same with Ginga, but they don't. In my opinion, they don't explain it well in Ginga.
Yeah. Anyway, we're getting on tangents. Let's go back to Guy. Yeah,
Yes.
so he
is Orb, and there's no other.
He is very much a wanderer type character, like a vagabond. He wanders in, he goes where he wants, he goes where he pleases, and he's very cool. You look at him and you're like, that's a cool dude,
Yeah, he shows up with his hat and his overcoat and his harmonica, and he plays you a tune.
He'll stand there and drink ramune as he looks at the sunset.
Yeah, and then he'll throw a popsicle stick off screen, and then in the next episode, they'll show him throwing the popsicle screen in the trash can because they want to make sure kids know to throw stuff away.
Yeah, that happened.
It did happen. So literally in the first episode, we see him eating a popsicle, and then he has to do something, so he just throws the stick. But they don't show where he throws it. He just throws it. So I don't know what they're wanting to assume there, but in the very next episode, they have him eat another popsicle, and they do the same scene where he throws it away, but this time it shows that they throw it in the trash. They're like, yes, he's been throwing it in the trash this whole time. Don't litter.
That's right.
I find that hilarious.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the whole wizard donut into Gaim fruit thing.
Yeah, that's a whole thing too, but we'll talk about that in later.
If when we get to doing a Gaim episode. But yeah, so I read that the writers were designing Guy based on Ultra 7, and he was very much that type of wanderer character. But in Ultra 7, Dan joins the Ultra Guard, the that series version of the Science Patrol. And that is our inside look of that organization. In this show, they wanted to see what if we took that character, but he stayed outside of that organization. So he never joins VTL, and we never really get a view on the inside of VTL.
I mean, technically,
But
he doesn't join the
until the-
SSP either. He's just friends with them.
Right. And so we see him interact, and he'll come and go as he pleases. But as the show progresses, he develops a friendship with those 3 individuals in the SSP. So you get to see that growth as well. Anything else you want to say?
About Guy in particular?
Yeah.
Well, one thing that's interesting about his character that he actually shows up a lot, he's a very proper in the way he speaks.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I did mean to state that.
Yeah.
So in Japanese, there's hierarchies in the language that's based on the hierarchies of the society. So you have kind of, the best I could equate it to English is you speak with manners when you speak to your boss and your teacher, and you use slang with your friends.
Yeah.
But
it's like you wouldn't say "What up, my dude" to your boss, and then if you go to your friends and say, "Hello, good day, my friends. How are you?" That like both those things sound awkward out of context, or like in a weird setting.
Right, but in the Japanese language, there's like actual grammar differences for who you're addressing. So the very polite version is called keigo, and when you're speaking with keigo, you are addressing your superiors, your parents, your teacher, your boss, your elders. And when you're using keigo, there's different verbs. So in English, you wouldn't change the way you say eat depending on who you talk to, because it's the same word. But in Japanese, it's a different word itself. So you're not only using different grammar structures, you're also using different verbs and different ways of conjugating those verbs. It's very complicated. But
the point we're making, though, is Guy speaks in this version of speech.
Right. So he is very, very proper, very, very formal in the way he speaks with others. So it kind of, one shows him being extremely polite, extremely proper, but it also kind of shows him being not so
in with the time.
Friendly is not the word I'm trying to use here. It's
it's also kind of like Orb is very old too. That's one thing. Like, or Guy is, and that's not something that's shown right away. But Orb has been, or Guy at least, has been alive for a very long time. So it's also a kind of way of showing that, well, it's him speaking very formally, but it's also showing that, well, he speaks like an old man, I guess. Think about it like how Yoda speaks in Star Wars. Because the way Yoda speaks, like, oh, we think it's weird, but it's like, well, Yoda's been around 700 years. Speech has changed a lot in 700 years, and he's just trying to keep up. And that's how it feels. Odd.
I never looked at Yoda like that before.
That's how they meant to do a speech, though.
Yeah, like I said, I've never actually thought of that. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think we covered Guy pretty good.
All right. Now, do we want to cover the SSP all as one, or do we want to hit them, touch on each of them individually?
Let's hit Jugs first.
Oh, Juggler. Okay.
Let's talk
Juggernus-
about Big
Juggler.
Jugs himself, Jugless Juggler.
The main man, mastermind mind, who is here to reap souls and awaken ancient evil. And he's also
Man,
Dai's
that
best friend.
Has the most suave suit.
Does he? What suit did he wear?
He wears that black suit,
Yes, the black suit, right?
like his human form. I'm saying wears like that full like.
Yeah. I
Black-
know what you're talking about. I've been used to seeing something different, so I kind of forgot that's what he used to wear all the time.
Right. Yeah. So, guy walking around in a black suit with a samurai sword. Quite intimidating. Yeah, so both Juggler and Guy have a history with one another. And we'll discover that history in other
The extended
fiction.
media really fleshes out why the way things are. Like in Orb, like you clearly see over the process of the story that they have history and that they, have interacted a lot in the past. But there's a big gap of, well, why is this the way it is? And unfortunately, as far as the series itself goes, without watching a lot of the extra content, you really don't understand the relationship to the fullest.
Right. And they do touch on their aspect, like their relationship when they interact. You get nuggets of it, and when you see some of the backstory, you do get parts of it, but you don't understand it fully without watching the other shows.
It's like
But
you get the way things are, but you don't get the why of way the things are.
exactly. But yeah, I definitely enjoy whenever they're on screen together. The actor who plays Juggler is just such a great actor. He can go from 0 to 100 in just like a snap of the fingers, He really chews the scenery.
Yeah, he's someone who has very comfortable in the role he has been working in.
Yes, and he plays it very well. And just watching them interact and the growth the growth between the two through the series is just a joy to watch.
Yes, because unlike a lot of the other ones, the villain actually grows as a character.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure he's still the ultimate big bad by the end, isn't he?
Yeah. But he does kind of just like he doesn't ever like turn from his evil ways, so to speak. But
No.
he more or less, instead of goes from a complete agent of chaos to a anti-hero status where he'll do evil things when it helps him, but if doing the right thing helps him more, he'll do whatever helps him the most,
Yeah, because when we
So
first see him, his whole deal is, I'm here to stir the pot and cause destruction.
Exactly. But he kind of gets away from that as the series progresses. Yeah, so we can move on to do you want to talk about his monster form first?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess that's something really important. So, yeah, he has a human form, but like as we talked about before, he actually also has a monster form. And well, the first time you see him, or the first few times you see him, he doesn't even show up straight up to Guy. He shows up to the SSP and just kind of hangs around. It's almost like, well, who is this guy? Because I don't think they even really say who he is until like the first 5 or 6 episodes in, right?
I think that's the case. Yeah. I think you're left wondering who that guy is for a little while.
Yeah, but then it turns out like, oh yeah, well, I guess we have to think he's an alien. Well, yes, he's definitely an alien, even with his human form. But he totally has this other monster form. It's this big tube-headed golden suit that has this big red crest or crescent moon on the chest, and he walks around with a samurai sword.
Actually, I don't think the crescent moon is there yet.
Yeah, it's in there. It's not in the Origin Saga.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Remember. Okay, so a little tidbit
Yeah.
of what's to come later. Um, we don't know where the Crescent comes from because not all of Orb's content got made, technically. Because they
Right.
had they planned to do a lot with Orb, and to be fair, they've done a lot more with Orb than they've done with a lot of Ultras.
Let's
But
just say the writer was a little overzealous.
yes, he was very ready to make this a whole thing, but not everything that he wanted to get made got made. So there are still tidbits of the story that are missing, but we still have a whole and complete story that's satisfying. There's just some elements that we're at this point we're just left to wonder because it just never got made. But it's nothing that's like need to know.
Well, and like I said, well, I want to do an episode on this, but later through magazines and books, they wrote out what those missing pieces were, so you get a general idea of what happened, but you don't necessarily have a fiction like a book or a comic or
There's no
series
medium
to
to really
watch.
understand, and it's okay.
Yeah, so you can understand like what happened, but you don't necessarily get to see what happened.
Yeah.
So moving on to
The
other characters,
SSP.
we can talk about the SSP, the Something Search People, and this name is silly to say the least. It's a reference to the original Science Patrol, the SSSP, but it's just a little silly nod.
Right.
As far as
Because they're not like some big organization that's making waves in the world. They're just three friends who run the science blog or the paranormal blog.
right, so those three characters, we'll start with Naomi, aka Cap. She's the leader of this group, and she you get the impression real quick that if she wasn't around, the other two characters wouldn't necessarily be able to survive. She keeps them grounded and keeps them basically keeping the lights on, like literally.
Yeah.
You see her for a while working. Every time you see her going to a part-time job, she's in a different uniform, and
Yeah.
part of that's probably just trying to be fan servicey, but because like one time she's working at a maid cafe or whatever, and the another time she's in a cow costume because she's handing out flyers for some barbecue restaurant.
Well, hold on. We say cow costume. It's like a onesie.
Yeah, I know, but the whole cosplay aspect of it,
I mean, sure, but yeah, we're supposed to get actually like they're the other two are the ones who are doing all of the work for getting the blog rolling and doing stuff. And she's like, "Well, we're not making any money, and we're renting a building, so let me go pay the bills."
Yeah, so you see her in working a different part-time job almost every episode, where she's the one having to go out there and make sure the lights stay on. She's the determined one. She's the one that's
she's got a dream and she's gonna make it work, even if she has to work like 10 jobs.
right. And Jetta and Shin are her friends who also help along with it. Shin's the one with the glasses. I had a hard time kind of keeping straight these two characters in the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know necessarily if that's because they didn't develop them well, because they do have development episodes. It's just, to me, my brain kind of remembers these two characters as like a whole, like an entity. I have a hard time. I remember aspects, but I have a hard time remembering if that trait belonged to Shin or if that trait belonged to Jetta.
Yeah, they're really their own like Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Yeah, and It also doesn't necessarily help that you rarely ever see them apart.
No, that is true. Like almost every time you see them, they are together. Now, when they have their own episodes, you do see them have their own stuff, but like
Right.
largely, like they're together.
Yeah, so Shin, the one with the glasses, he's the inventor.
Yeah, he
He's the
makes all
one
their
that
gear. He makes cool stuff. He made a gun that like glued everything together. It was funny.
yeah, and a lot of times these inventions are just slapstick gags,
Mhm.
like comic relief in the scene, but most of the time whenever they're using like specific devices that help them through that adventure of the day, the devices come from him because he's generally a genius, he's a genius inventor creating these different devices.
All right.
Jeddah, on the other hand, I don't even know if I could tell you specific
He wants
character traits of him.
he wants to be a like a film guy, like right? Like he wants to do like recordings and stuff.
Yeah, he's the one usually recording their vlogs or whatever they're when they're doing investigations. He's usually the one who's recording it. Most of the time, not very well.
No. No, and that was something that came up a lot in like the first few episodes was like, well, your battery died or you were using the wrong lens or you pointed it the wrong way or you lost the camera,
Right.
which was like very frustrating as someone to watch like, ah, come on. Come on, fam. You got to do your job. We want to watch we want y'all to do well.
Exactly. It's like you got caught up in this kaiju battle and you're right there for the perfect shot, but you was recording with your lens cap on. Or you were already recording and when you didn't know you were recording and when you went to turn on the recording, you actually turned off the recording.
Or like you pointed the camera at yourself and shot your whole face the whole time.
You broke up a little bit on my end. What was that?
I was saying that he shot his own face the whole time because literally the camera was pointed at him.
Oh,
Not...
that's right. That's right. Yeah. But yeah, so these characters they're wholesome, and we kind of discussed this in our general thoughts, but they feel extremely genuine. Those kinds of gags would get annoying if it was done by other characters, but because I like these characters and they feel so genuine, you just kind of go along for it.
Yeah.
The last main character we're gonna talk about is Naomi's uncle, Shibukawa. He is. We actually find out, like very towards the end, he's actually a high-ranking official in the VTL.
Yeah,
But we don't really think about him. We kind of see him as a bumbling beat cop kind of character.
Yeah, he's mostly portrayed as somebody who's like not good at his job, and he's just kind of there. And for really the most part, we feel like the whole organization, like it's worthless.
Yeah, and exactly. But towards the end, they actually show their worth, and you actually see a different side of them. But because this series has a different perspective, where we're on the outside of this organization, not on the inside of the organization, we really kind of see their ineffective.
Yeah. Well, we say ineffective, but honestly, this is probably the most genuine show where like we have to wonder is like, well, how come the general public doesn't ever see how much the secret organization is doing? And honestly, this is the best example of why, because for the whole show, we felt like, well, they're useless. They're not doing anything important. Why does it exist? And then near the end, they show one episode where it shows what he actually is doing day to day. And it's like, oh, him and his whole organization have been doing stuff like this the whole time. So, no, they're not useless.
You're talking about that episode, but what I was referring to was like in the last couple episodes where they aid and he goes into the command center for like a second and you realize, oh, he's actually a high ranking official, and they help towards the end of the series. But you're referring to the episode with his daughter, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, the point stands. You actually see that this character is actually competent and he's actually good at his job, and this organization is not necessarily as bumbling as we thought they were
You
looking
know,
out.
they're not actually worthless. They're making waves. We just don't know it, which I think is
Yeah.
very good because it shows like really, even if we didn't realize it, we had the perspective that most normal people would have about these secret organizations in the other shows.
Right. So I think we can move on to talking about the monster designs.
All right.
So this show, they have, like Ginga and X before it and the other shows, they do a lot where they bring old kaiju back to reuse the suits and to
Well, there's budget concerns, you know.
exactly, it's specifically budget, but it also aids because even though they're saving budget by reusing suits, you also recognize certain characters and you're like, oh, they're bringing Red King back, or oh, they're
Yeah.
bringing Gomera back.
It's
And
definitely
it's
a thing
fun
that's
because
like,
you like those
yeah, like
characters.
unlike a lot of the other like Tokus, Ultraman's really like, oh, you can have a favorite monster and that be a valid thing because that monster will more than likely show up again at some point. Doesn't always
Exactly.
happen, but mostly it does.
Yeah, and specifically for like Power Rangers and Kaiju, or not Kaiju, Kamen Rider and Sentai, these like Monster of the Week designs, they're mostly throwaway, you know? They're used once and then they're done. And if you told me name 5 monsters from any, like, name not the general characters or the main bad guys, but the Monster of the Weeks, you told me to name 5 out of any series I've watched,
I couldn't name
being a
one.
total of 20 or more, I couldn't tell you any of them.
Yeah.
But you tell me to tell you 10 or 20 Ultraman Kaijus, I've got you, man. You know?
It's true. Heck, even I could probably do that many.
Yeah, and like for Tokuger being one of my being my favorite Sentai, I was looking through like some of the Monster of the Week things, and it's like I do remember this one, but that's because it was a funny plot element for that episode. But there were several where it's like I don't even remember this. I don't even remember this one, you know. And I think it speaks volumes.
Yeah,
That
like I can remember like the general name for the monster race as a whole for season to season. But like
right.
I can't remember like specific names of a certain monster that showed up. It's like, oh hey, it's that guy.
Yeah, and I have seen like the opinion expressed where they would like where people would like less reuse of suits and more actual monster designs, and I agree to an extent with that sentiment. You know, you want a new design, a
Yeah,
new
we want to see new
interesting
stuff.
thing. You want some new stuff. But I specifically really enjoy the fact that Ultraman reuses all of these suits because you start to
You form a connection
gain
to
a
the
fondness.
monsters, right?
Yeah, you're forming a connection to a certain kaiju, you know?
Like I can actually for Ultraman tell you, hey, I have a favorite monster, and that's not something I can do for Rider or Sentai.
Yeah. I could tell you maybe a favorite like monster general or a favorite main bad guy, but
Sure,
a
I can
monster
tell
of
you a
the
favorite
week, I'd
monster
be pressed
race.
to tell you one in general. Not
Yeah,
just my favorite, but one in general.
yeah. Like you tell me to
Yeah.
name any monster. Like you could tell me right now, you would give me $1,000 if I named the name of one monster from any Sentai or Rider show that wasn't like a main villain, and I would say, well, you might as well just keep it because I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I might be able to pull out like specifically for MMPR because I had certain um action figures of, say, Porky Pig and Eye Guy and King Sphinx. Those I could tell you because I had action figures of those, and those, even though they only ever appeared in one episode, they had a larger presence in my childhood. Now, as far as like this year's Toku or whatever that I was watching, no, number one, they're not going to get figures of them. They don't do that anymore. And on top of that, they're not even that memorable.
Yeah, it's like they're cool designs, but they're not designs that are meant to last. They're not ones that like make a lasting impression. They're gonna make an initial impression and then be like, okay, now we're done.
Right.
Because then, like, I don't know. I guess if you saw some of them more often, you could like be like, okay, yeah, this monster is like one that I could probably, you know, be used to seeing.
Yeah,
but then again, largely
like
a lot of, especially I think now too, I'm thinking, lots of Sentai and Rider type monsters are very humanoid. They don't get experimental with like their designs, like how they look. Like very much like they're human like creatures that have weird heads and like a weird scaled or slishy furry body, and it has some kind of like defining feature that they're going to use as a weapon, and that's pretty much what all their character design will boil down to. But then you look at Ultra Kaiju, and literally there's a monster that's a giant barnacle that has a egg beater coming out of it.
Oh, yeah.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Budokan, is that what it was?
Which one?
I think it's like Budokan. Is that what it was?
Bolton? Yeah, I think it's Bolton.
Yeah, that. And it's like a dude sitting like crouched up, and he's just like moving the best he can, and like the suit is like contracting in and outward, and he's just hopping along.
Yeah, but
that's funny.
But yeah, I think we've gone off on a big tangent on this, but essentially what we're saying is Ultra doesn't get a lot of new designs, but when you see it, you can pretty much guarantee you'll see it again in the future at some point, and this is a new showing up character. Like specifically, I think from this one, I think, isn't this the show? No, I think it was X. Which show introduced Galactron? Was that this one?
Yeah, it was this one.
It was this. Yeah, like Galactron is a robotic type kaiju that shows up in this, and it even relates into Shin's character backstory a little bit.
Yeah,
because he's a tech
that was a good
inventor,
episode.
And it was a really good episode. But then later on, like Galactron has a way bigger presence in Geed, and from then on out, and like the extra material they have going. So like even though like he just showed up in this, he showed up again, and like has a big presence. So that's like how reaching a character design can be in Ultra. Like once you see it, it's like don't expect to never see it again.
Right. And so like these suits are expensive to make, you know, and they make them to last. So because they're able to reuse the monsters, so like for like original kaiju designs, you might get anywhere from 2 to 7, you know, depending on the series, you know. But a lot of times those characters will come back, and I definitely enjoyed the original kaiju in Orb, Galactron being one of those, but there was also Magarochi, you know, that the big bad monster that Juggless is trying to resurrect, and that's his main goal.
And that's the thing too, even like the big bad in-game monster that they have to fight at the very end, those monsters are also fair game to show up again. Like Zeton, the original kaiju in-game for Ultraman, still shows up today a lot.
Yeah, and Zeton was even in this show as in the flashbacks as Maga Zeton, which was just the same Zeton design, except the yellow on his chest is blue instead. But yeah, so they did several like Maga versions of previous kaiju where they were just repainted or powered up in some way. Whether like I think Bimular had like horns stacked on top of him.
Yeah, there was a couple of boosted forms I think in this one,
Yeah.
which like they weren't
So
huge design changes, but it was
it
enough.
was
It's like,
literally just the same suit and they tacked something on or
yeah,
they painted something differently.
just enough to show like you know, there's less is more type. I think.
Yeah. And it's probably budgetary as well.
Well, for sure, but it worked.
Yeah. So Magorochi, he pops up halfway through the series, and I absolutely love this design. There's not really. He's got the traditional Godzilla style, not necessarily structure, but the he stands on the back twos, and he his back two legs, and he has arms, so it's the same proportions of a Godzilla like kaiju, kind of like a Gomora or a Red King or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where they've got that typical build, but he's got these giant like spike wing protrusions that come off, and he's like this burgundy color with like this purplish blue tones. There's just something about that kaiju that just looks really cool.
Yep. I mean, yeah. And then like I think he even gets like a more powered up version later, which makes him even like it just looks creepy. Like it's cool, but it's creepy, you know. Like this looks like like a lot of the monsters like are kaiju. You see them and it's like, okay, yeah, that's a cool design. But this one, like they don't feel like threats sometimes. I almost want to say,
right.
But like he shows up and he looks like something that's like, oh yeah, this might eat a planet.
Yeah, and so the upgrade form Magata no Orochi, they're able to defeat him sort of in the middle of the series, but he comes back even more powerful at the end, and that's the foe that they have to take down.
Mm-hmm.
Juglus, he gets a fusion form where he fuses initially with Magarochi's tail alongside Zeton and Pandon. Pandon is that red one that has the two bird heads.
Yeah, it's like the first one we see, I think, in the show. Isn't that from the first episode?
No.
Oh, well, that was a bird though. So. It's a different bird.
Yeah. That was a different bird. But yeah, Pandon doesn't have wings. He's got that traditional Godzilla-like structure.
Yeah, and he has that red crystal in the middle of his head, right? I think.
Don't remember.
Am I thinking of something different?
I don't remember if he had a crystal, but he's got it was two bird heads, and then they fused that with Zeton, and they made Zepandon, which was, like we said, this isn't the first time we're going to see this. This shows up in later series. But it's a really cool design.
Yeah, and whenever Juggler does a fusion, that's like his default go-to.
Yeah. This is the first like actual fusion that we see in this show, but apparently they liked it enough because they used that throughout Jeed afterward.
Yeah, there was like 4 or 5 different ones in that show.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how many, but 4 or 5 sounds about right.
I mean, we'll have the exact number when we do the Jeed episode.
Right. So
stay tuned to find out the exact number and no other reason.
Yeah, so as far as I think that's pretty much like the new kaiju suits that came out in Orb.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the others were those previously established characters coming back to some degree.
Right.
So we can move on to story, and we can touch on story a little bit. We don't want to go too deep with it, but we can go into our story elements.
I mean, we've kind of been touching on it this whole time, more or less.
Yeah, we really have. And talking about characters, we mentioned the relationship between Guy and Juggler, and that really, I wouldn't necessarily say, well, I guess I would say it. I would kind of say that the relationship between Juggler and Guy is the main narrative through the show, because it's partly trying to figure out how they're related and how they know each other, and also how their relationship now is growing,
Yeah, like,
while
why are
they're
you the way you
currently
are?
while they're currently adversaries. They weren't adversaries at one point, and they're not necessarily going to stay adversaries. But it's really interesting seeing how that transpires. Another through line for this show is Naomi's relationship, not only with her team, but with Guy. And we also touched on this with characters a little bit, but we kind of see, it's through Naomi's eyes that we start to see different aspects of Guy. Partly through flashbacks, but she's the one that's kind of knocking down his walls. Speaking of his age, and he's also not from this planet,
He's a bit disconnected.
He's disconnected. He's very much a wanderer. There's no need to connect too deep with someone, because you're going to leave at some point. And we also see through flashbacks, he did have a connection with someone, and how that ended badly.
Which is also a very big through plot of the show, and, working relationship between Guy and another character. I guess we're going to talk about it. I mean...
Yeah, we're gonna talk about it. We already gave our spoiler warning, so anything after this, that's on the listener.
That's true.
So
well, here, we'll double down. Here's where, if you've been listening this whole time and for some reason I've been trying to avoid spoilers, this is where it gets very spoilery.
Right. So this one bit right here is in the flashbacks. We see Guy with this woman named Natasha. And we come to find out that he lost his power trying to fight Magazeton. And in that battle, as collateral damage, Natasha was killed.
Well,
or so it seems.
At least right away. But,
Yeah.
But, and here it is. She's not dead.
Yeah. And we actually start to see that, it was actually Juggler who saved her in that time period. So this is when we're starting to see Juggler wasn't bad at one point in time. He actually has some he was a good guy at one point in time, and he still has that humanity left in him. We also notice that
it's less like he's not evil. He's just a jerk to everybody.
Right. Naomi, go ahead.
And I was just like, it's more like for him, like his growth is more like he has something to prove, and he took the wrong path in trying to do it. But like he does learn sort of the error of his ways. I wouldn't say he becomes a good guy.
He's mostly butthurt that Guy was chosen and not him. And he's basically like, because the light rejected me, I'm going to embrace darkness.
Okay, we didn't talk about that. So when Guy first got his powers to become Orb, he was actually, I would say, kind of competing with Juggler. Essentially, the Orb power was on top of this one mountain, and they were both climbing the mountain. And Juggler climbed the mountain first. And I say first, but it was just barely. But Juggler climbed it first. He made it to the top first, and he tried to get the light, and the light said no. and
Right.
guy came up literally right after him, and it chose him instead.
Right. So that's the thing he has to prove is he's trying to prove not to Guy, but necessarily he's trying to prove to himself that he doesn't need the light. You know?
Or that he's worthy, or he's worth it.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, but it makes for good storytelling. But he eventually comes over to not necessarily the good side, but he is less evil.
He comes around to the idea that power isn't everything, but he still has a chip on his shoulder and he still has something to prove.
Right.
But he's not so gung-ho about abusing people's lives in order to meet his ends anymore.
Right. And we see through the flashbacks that's that juggler saves Natasha. And we also learn that it's not necessarily stated, but Guy had a relationship somewhat with Natasha. We don't know how deep that relationship was, but her death, that he believed that she died, and that death weighed on him quite a lot. But Natasha, for some reason, it hears the melody that he plays on the harmonica, and she can't quite put her finger on it, but there's something about that melody that's familiar. And we see in the flashbacks that it's actually the melody that Natasha used to sing that Guy has played in memory of her. So basically we find out that Naomi is a descendant of Natasha.
Yeah,
so
like Natasha's ancestor was from Russia, and she moved to Japan, and then and how we find out's really funny because or I don't know, funny. It's interesting because it keeps referring to like, oh, it was my great grandmother's good luck charm, and it was a nesting doll, and they're like, oh, yeah, but you can't open the last one. It's bad luck or something. But the very last one contained a picture of Guy with Natasha.
That's right. Yeah, so that was a very interesting moment. I've heard other people say that they like saw it a mile away, that the twist wasn't that surprising to them, but when I saw it, I don't usually pick up on these kinds of things. When Swooce and I discuss certain twists and in shows and stuff like that, he's usually called it. He's usually picked up on it. But for me, I'm always surprised. I'm like, I had no idea. I did not see that coming. So for me,
don't remember if I picked up on this one or not, though.
But for me, I was like, whoa, that's so cool. I did not expect that at all.
I feel like I called this one. I don't know, it's hard to say because it's not like I have a 100% call everything rate, but more often than not I do. That's not really me bragging. It's just I've taken a lot of film classes, so I know I can usually spot narratively what they're trying to set up.
The whole every story's been written kind of thing.
Not just that. It's just like everything has meaning. Is like kind of a way you have to look at it. So it's like, oh, well, even though this thing that they did seems insignificant, it's like, well, no, not really. Like, it may not seem significant, but they wouldn't have shown you it if it didn't matter for some reason.
Right.
So it's more like the question everything. And then, like, you get to thinking too much, and you start getting theories. And then
is that whole thing that they say, is it called the Chekhov's gun? Is that what it is?
No, that's more Chekhov's gun's more of like a Deus Ex Machina thing, I think, where it's like it gets you out of every situation.
Well, I thought Chekhov's gun was like if they show you a gun in like Act 1, by Act 3 it has to be fired or something like that. Isn't that what they say? Or am I completely wrong on whatever I'm thinking?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that literary element is. I can look it up real quick. if you want to say something else while I'm figuring out what this
Yeah.
one's about.
Yeah, too I'm not too knowledgeable on these kinds of things, but as far as story as a whole, you've got these two threads, and those are the major threads, but we also have a thread of Juggler trying to resurrect Maga Orochi, and then he succeeds in resurrecting it, and then we have the whole Belial card subplot. So with Orb using Belial's power, he is corrupted to a degree, and he can't control that berserk form. So there's a whole subplot with him coming to terms with using that power and the consequences of his actions from using that power, and that
Overcoming
helps
personal
lead
darkness and evil.
exactly, and that kind of leads into the end game of this series with fighting Magata no Orochi. But I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say just on the story elements, but I would like to touch on a few specific episodes that kind of stood out to us,
Sure.
that when we think about this show, we
Like
think,
these are the fondest memories, the ones that made the most lasting impact. Oh, but Chekhov's gun, just for those of you who are wondering, it's the principle that states that every element in a story has to be necessary, and if it's irrelevant, then you should remove it from your story. Because why spend time on something that doesn't matter?
okay. So I had a more literal interpretation of that, but basically I wasn't too off.
No, it's like, oh well, he was shown that he has a gun, and that was pointed out to us. It's not like you can look at his character and see it's on his hip. It's more like the camera panned in and you saw that he is indeed armed. Then it's like, well, he's gonna use it.
Exactly. So if he doesn't use it, then they're wasting the time of the show.
Yeah.
And that was an unnecessary scene. Yeah, okay. So that makes sense. Hey man, we learned something. Cool.
Because learning is half the battle.
G.I. Joe. Or that's knowing is half the battle. But yeah. Moving into the episodes, one of the episodes I wanted to mention is the Ragon episode. Now, Ragon is an interesting kaiju, to say the least. It it mostly looks like a Ultraman version of the creature from the Black Lagoon. It's that greenish sea humanoid shaped sea monster character, and he shows up early in to the original Ultraman series. I think episode 3 or 4.
Yeah, he shows up quite a bit. He's one of the oldest kaiju.
Yeah, so he's been around for a long time,
and he's not always
episode.
Evil.
Go ahead.
Honestly, and when we see him, he's usually not even evil. Usually don't kill him.
This episode being the first series I started to watch, this is the first time I ever came in contact with this kaiju, and this episode is such a heartwarming episode that it immediately put Ragon in my top 5 favorite kaiju.
Is this the one where he has a kid?
Yeah, there is a fisherman or a merchant who sells fish. I don't know if he's specifically the fisherman, but he sells fish, and he comes across these two creatures. There's a Ragon, and then it has an infant, and the infant's sick. So he takes pity upon them and hides them in his back warehouse, and tries to take care of them and to shield them from scrutiny of the pup. And it's just there's a lot of touching moments in it. This is one of the first episodes where I feel, Shibukawa is not completely useless. Because at the beginning I was like, he's just a throwaway comedy relief character, and this is one of the first episodes where I'm like, oh, he's actually not useless. Awesome.
Yeah. Like most certainly.
Yeah. I really, really enjoyed that episode. Another episode I really liked was episode 11. And
oh, yeah, that's a good one.
yeah, this episode, there's circumstances in which Naomi's mother comes into town. And
it's always a trip.
However the story is orchestrated to get to this point, basically there's a dinner date of Guy and Naomi with Naomi's mother, and Juggler shows up and sits down at the table.
I think this is also the first time we saw the more human side of Juggler, because up until now we saw him as a mysterious, evil, malevolent force that is pretty much straight up going to destroy everything. And this time it's like, well, hold up. Like, he had some eccentric attitudes or like mannerisms before, but when he showed up in here, it was like, oh, this is very human.
Right. And there's not much I can say about this that would do it justice, because it's just such a funny scene.
It's so good.
So me trying to describe it wouldn't be a service to it. So I just absolutely love this episode, and it's probably in the top 5 of this show.
Was this also the episode with the big lady?
Maybe. I think so. Yeah, because that's what ends the scene, is the big lady looks into the window and they run off, isn't it?
Yeah, so like in a previous episode before this, there was an episode with like the spirit. And I thought at the time it was going to be like a one and done thing. But for whatever reason, she shows up again in this episode, and she's a giant for whatever reason. So even
or was that just the beginning of that episode?
I think that was a different episode.
I'm not entirely sure. I could be wrong. It's been a little while since I've watched it.
Yeah, like I said, it's hard to remember when exactly what events happen.
Right.
But she shows up again, and she just kind of was like they're all having this very awkward but hilarious dinner date with the 4 of them. And then you just kind of look out the window and you just see a giant face staring in.
Right.
And it's like, all right, sure, I don't know what's going on anymore. And it's just great. It's a fun time. Recommend it. One of the best parts of the whole show.
I agree. Another great group of episodes is 14 and 15, and that's the Galactron 2-parter that we were talking about.
Yes. I love Galactron's design.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And I really like how they utilize it in the future.
Mm-hmm. Because the first time like we see him, it's essentially like he's this dragon-like kaiju that's a machine. Like the first time we see him, and like he's inert when we first show up. And
it just really shows up from space.
Yeah, so they quarantine off the area. Only people who are allowed in are the VTL and the SSP because of their relationship to Shibakawa. And then like Shin is also an expert in robotics.
Right, and it's also that because this is the focus episode about the factory with the springs.
Yes.
And that just so happens to like land in that area. So those people are kind of there too, because it happened where they were at.
Right.
But yeah, so that was a great 2-parter.
It's very good. And it takes like the idea that the monster, what the kaiju's about. And even though we only get like a little taste of him, it's blown into full gear when we see him show up again. Right.
And they establish some lore about this kaiju, and they really expand upon it later. Another great episode is episode 18, Hard Boiled River, which is that episode you were referring to with Shibukawa.
Oh, and, yeah. Which both gives us a look into him as a competent character, and also shows that the VTL is a competent organization.
Right. It's quite interesting. You meet his daughter, and his daughter's absolutely annoyed with him because she thinks he's as incompetent as the audience thinks he is. And they go on a stakeout and they follow around. They follow him throughout the whole day.
Episode. Yeah.
As he's
just doing his job, and for the most
Exactly.
part, really, even though I say he's doing his job, like he's like seemed like doing like good guy stuff, but he's not really doing anything super interesting till near the end.
He looks like a beat cop, you know?
Yeah.
Like doing, here, let me help you with those bag of groceries. Let me help you cross the street, you know? Oh, here. Oh, your balloon's stuck in the tree. Here, let me get that. I don't exactly know if that's happened, but it's those types of events. And you start to think, oh, he really is as worthless as he is. And then we learn a lot more about him.
It's a really good view into a character and can really show, like I said, like a way you probably didn't even think about it was this really does show the relationship of those secret organizations and what it's like to be a pedestrian who doesn't understand. You know? Because like a lot of times you get the sense of, well, why do people not get it? Like, why do they think they're not doing this, or how could they think this way or that way? And the whole show, you are in that position because you're not in the know on VTL. But then in that episode, it suddenly everything starts to click and like, oh, I get it now.
So another interesting episode to mention is episode 19, entitled Spirit Rinky. That's the episode where Naomi's friend's getting married and she goes to a bachelor party.
Oh, the one with the shoes, right?
Yeah, the one with the shoes. So the girls at the party are the like rich, uppity type, and because she doesn't really have that kind of money, she is wearing the best kind of shoes she can afford. Well, they start mocking her for her attire, and she gets really mad about it. So she leaves, storms off, and throws her shoes at the statue. Well, part of the lore of this statue is that
which was explained earlier in the episode. Just, you know, they didn't just throw you in there as like to what's happening. They explained earlier on what it was.
Exactly. So this statue is supposed to help grant people the blessing of finding their loved ones, or finding someone who's you know, if you're single, you're fine to find someone.
Yeah, it helps you find your soulmate.
Marry. And she's angry, so she throws these shoes at it and she gets real mad. Well, because she was disrespectful to this statue and this spirit,
well,
it becomes this. Go ahead.
That's kind of part of it. Remember, the spirit was also a vengeful spirit. It was really odd because it was like, well, it's an angry, vengeful spirit that helps people.
Huh.
If you recall, so she really it kind of like connected with the two, and that's why it awoke.
Okay.
That's why it wasn't being disrespectful that did it. It was, okay, you know what? Our situations, they're similar. I got you.
Right. That's right. So basically the funny thing is the spirit wears her shoes. So it's a funny giant samurai evil spirit wearing women's shoes.
Broken women's shoes.
Yeah, like broken women's shoes, I might add, because they broke because they were cheap.
Which is why she threw them.
Exactly. So that's a really funny episode. And this episode next is probably my single favorite episode of this entire series.
Oh, the one with the cafe. Yeah. Because
episode 22. Episode 22, The Unmarked Cafe. In this episode, our characters find or hear about this cafe called the Black Star Coffee, or Black Star Cafe. And they sell this coffee that's supposedly the best coffee you've ever tasted. and you wander into it by accident, and as soon as they leave, they can never find the place again, and it completely ruins coffee for everyone else because it's so good you can't have that good coffee anymore, and it just ruins coffee for you.
It's like if when you eat a steak, like a really, really good steak, and then like somebody says, okay, now here, eat this bologna. It's like
Yeah,
that.
it's like having really, really good authentic sushi and then just going and getting like an American California roll and it just does not hit the spot.
I would disagree.
What?
I mean, I understand what you mean, but California rolls is good, so I don't know. Maybe my palate's a bit unrefined when it comes to sushi, because my brain's like, sushi.
Yeah. But like I said, for me, I like to say, well, bad pizza's still pizza.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So it's not as good, but it's still pretty good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, this episode, the cafe owner is a um is a alien who came to Earth to take over the world, but they're getting out of town. All of the aliens that are on the planet have caught wind that something bad is about to happen, something bad is coming. So
Yeah.
basically what Juggler's end goal is going to transpire. And everyone's kind of getting out of town, we don't need to be here when that happens. Let's pack our bags and go. So they had given up on taking over the world a long time ago, but his business partner, or his friend partner, Nova, which is an old kaiju, and I actually really like the design of this kaiju.
Me too. It looks like an octopus, kinda.
Yeah, it's based off of a Teru Teru Bolzu. Now, a Teru Teru Bolzu is like one of those uh it's like a rag with a rubber band wrapped around this with the body, and it has like tendrils coming off, and you either cut a hole in or draw on eyes, but basically they're hung on like a porch or a storefront to herd away bad weather. It's like a weather doll.
Mm-hmm. It's like those little weather spirits you see a lot. That looks like kind of like a ghost, but it's more relating to weather and like good weather.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I don't know if saying Japanese tradition is the correct word to say, but it's not uncommon to see. It's a very Japanese thing. You would see like the Teru Teru Bozu hanging on like the shop's awning or whatever. It's kind of like having wind chimes on your porch.
Yeah.
They're not uncommon, but it's just a really interesting episode. They just it's funny because the moral of the episode is to show you not to give up on your dreams and to persevere.
Even though the dream was to take over the world.
But the dream was to take over the world.
And I mean, the
really
episode's also
funny.
interesting because it kind of shows like, well, we see a lot that there's alien activity on Earth, and we just usually don't see it. And this is kind of a like, well, this is relating to that because heck, Guy even shows up to the cafe and he knows where it's at.
Yeah,
like and everybody knows he's Ultraman, and like he kind of knows like, well, why they're here, but he's just cool as like, you're not causing problems.
right.
So,
In this establishment, we don't fight. We're here for the tea or the coffee. If you want to fight, you take it outside.
yeah.
Yeah, so this kind of ushers in the last 3 episodes of the series, which is the big conclusion of the series, and I don't really want to get too in depth into it, not that we haven't already ruined or spoiled all of this stuff as it is, but it's just a really, really good conclusion to a series.
They kill the monster. You're welcome.
Yeah, and it's very much the juggler, even though he's the one who brings this on, he realizes, and this probably wasn't the best decision, and he helps Orb take it down, which is just such a great feeling to wrap up an episode with, or the series with. It's a satisfactory ending. And a lot of shows can end poorly and just taint the whole good show.
Yeah, or
But
it's over and like that's it.
yeah, but when show has a really good ending, it just kind of like wraps the whole thing together with a nice bow.
Hmm.
I think that'll do it for what we want to talk about. As far as story, do we want to kind of mention the negatives that we have with this show? I honestly
Stuff we
tried
didn't
to
like with it.
Yeah, so like things we would nitpick or have any kind of problems, and I tried to come up with
So,
some
something,
problems
yeah.
I would have, but I honestly couldn't even think of anything.
It's a bit slow
That
in the beginning.
Slow, yeah,
I mean, because at first it's like I said, the first time I watched it, I didn't get into it. It's like generic Toku the first few episodes. It takes a
took
little
you a
bit to like really appreciate what's going on.
would you say by like episode 5 or 6?
Yeah, no, I'd really say more by episode 3 or 4 because I think the first time I watched it, I only watched like maybe the first 2 episodes, maybe the third one.
Okay.
So like it doesn't take a ton to get you in, but I mean, especially in the age of technology and speed, if you're not hooked by the first episode, I can understand people not keeping watching it. So I liked it, and overall, I'd say it's worth powering through if you feel the need to, because it's not like the first 2 episodes were bad; they just weren't super interesting.
Right.
And like, because I didn't know what was going on, like, and you can really see how it was all done by design, and you can look back and appreciate the way it is.
Right.
But that being said, it's a kind of a bold move to knowingly make a show that's not going to be gripping the first bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. And I've spoken with a few people who, while I say Orb is a really, really good jumping on point
Mm-hmm.
for people, with people who've never experienced Ultraman, especially if they've never experienced Tokusatsu in general, it can be a really difficult hurdle to kind of jump through.
I mean, I'd obviously already been watching Toku's type shows, but I mean, I felt Orb was fine. Orb was still ultimately my first Ultra I watched all the way through, I think.
Yep.
So.
Or no, Rube was.
Rube was? Oh, yeah. Well, I guess Rube was. Well,
Yeah.
Orb was the first one that I went back and watched.
Right. Yeah, so honestly, I would like to be completely like transparent. I would love to have like maybe a few nitpicks just so I can show like I'm not being too biased, but honestly, I guess I am really biased towards this show. I just can't think of anything that I would say is a negative, because even the things that would annoy me, like some of the over the topness of certain characters, it actually turned to be quite endearing and be a positive as opposed to a negative.
Yeah, and like I said, I agree. Like, there's nothing that just stands out as in like, oh, this is really bad. I don't think they should have done this. I mean, that's maybe just because it could have, and ultimately it just aligned with things I like, and it just hit home with me. So like this is like personal nitpicks. It's not like things that are objectively bad with the show.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, so I think that probably wraps up our Ultraman Orb discussion. There are other parts of Orb. There's the Orb movie. There is Ultra Fight Orb. There's also Orb Origin Saga, and we will cover these at some point. And there's also what we've been alluding to, the the Ultra Orb Chronicle 10 episode plan is how it's commonly referred to as. This is
Oh yeah.
the thing that we're talking about where there was a multitude of parts that didn't get produced but are out there for us to read and to kind of understand where some of the aspects come from. And I would like to do a whole episode on that just so we could kind of discuss it. And
Yeah. Orb was an overly ambitious project, and honestly, I'm impressed at how much they actually got made.
right, yeah. As far as where to watch it, order the Blu-rays from Mill Creek. Come on, guys. It's $20, give or take a few dollars, for the whole series and the movie. And then for $10 or so more, you can get a second Blu-ray that has Orb Origin Saga and Ultra Fight Orb on it.
We are not.
It
I
is.
would like to point out we are not sponsored by Mill Creek. We are just saying, as two people who like it, we think this is the best way to watch it.
Absolutely. And if they did want to sponsor us, I would take it. But we are not sponsored and we are not getting paid or special promotion from this. We just like the product and we recommend it highly. It's really the best way to watch it because you get it in HD. You get it all in a package, and also it comes with a digital code so you can watch it digitally as well. Like Swooce and I said, we absolutely wish that we could get the same level of care for Kamen Rider and Super Sentai to have anything like these releases. But we're not as fortunate in those communities to get what Ultraman has.
No, I thought there. I had hope last year, and nothing came of it.
Yeah, I hope something else happens, but we'll have to see.
But for now, I guess yeah. So Mill Creek is so far remains the best way to get it localized. So we don't condone watching it through streaming sites that are less than legal. And this is the best legal way to watch it.
Right. It was on Crunchyroll at one point in time. I don't think it still is. I'm not entirely sure. You can check.
I don't have a Crunchyroll account, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, you don't have to have a Crunchyroll account to watch Crunchyroll.
Oh, that's true.
But you just have ads on top of it. But there is Tokushoutsu has gotten the license to air it through their Tokusatsu channel through Tubi. So if you have Pluto TV or Tubi, you can find episodes of this. I'm not completely familiar with them. I think one of those services is video on demand and another one is like actual TV channels where they just air it, so you can't choose what you watch. But for a free option, I think you can watch them officially through those channels as well. So look into that if you can't order the Blu-rays.
I think you can get the Blu-rays off of Amazon.
Yeah, well, I'm saying financially.
Oh, well, yeah,
if you can't afford the Blu-rays. But yeah, that should wrap up nicely our Ultraman Orb discussion. Before we go, we actually got an email.
It's true. Somebody actually sent us fan mail. Now, no names, but would you like to read the email?
Well, we'll call him Thomas. It's all right if we call him Thomas. We won't give out any other personal information. But we want to thank Thomas for sending us this email. And it reads as, Hello, I'm a new listener and I enjoyed the first 2 episodes. I'm slowly making my way through Ultraman. It's enjoyable, but it feels slow. This is probably a controversial opinion, and I am currently going through the Heisei Phase 2 era of Kamen Rider. My favorites are Double and Geo. I've seen Super Sentai. My favorites are Jetman and Gokaiger, but those two are the only Sentai I enjoy. Anyway, if you do any extra episodes, I would love to hear your opinions on Kamen Rider Double and Kaizoku Sentai Gokaiger. Thank you for reading our email. And thank you so much for sending the email, Thomas. We completely and utterly appreciate it.
Yeah. Like, thank you so much. Like, I was actually not expecting to get any email responses for a while, if any.
Yeah,
So,
I figured it would be a little bit longer than our first couple episodes.
yeah.
And we completely appreciate you reaching out and getting in touch with us.
Now, on the request you made, we do at some point plan on doing auxiliary episodes. Like, we will do a I guess we can. I say we can do an episode on Gokaiger. We've both seen that one, right?
Yeah. So our first couple will be a Kamen Rider Gaim and then Resho Sentai Tokyuger. But that would have to require us. I want to do a Gaim rewatch because it's been so long.
I would like to do that as well.
And you would have to watch Tokyuger at some point, which it's been so long. I'll probably do a rewatch with you. So those are further in the future.
Yeah, but we will do them. Double is a really good rider show, so like I would definitely recommend that one. I'll try to get you to watch it at some point because I think that one's worth watching too.
Yeah, and I've always liked the aesthetic of Double. I think I might have watched the first couple episodes, but I never watched Kamen Rider Double, so I can't necessarily opine on that until I do. But as far as Gokaiger is, we've both seen Gokaiger, and we would absolutely love to do an episode on Gokaiger at some point. Yeah. It's absolutely a fantastic show.
Gokaiger is probably peak Sentai material. Like even without like it was a anniversary episode or season where they did like had a whole bunch of other stuff in it. But honestly, even if it didn't have the anniversary stuff, I think it would have been a great standalone show. It was just good.
The characters are great, the actors are great, the suits are great, the gimmick is fun. The fact that it's a was it 35th? Yeah, it was the 35th anniversary. So wow, it has been 10 years. Wow. It's been 10 years since Gokaiger, man.
I didn't watch it when it came out. It doesn't feel that long ago for me.
Right.
I actually watched it last year. I want to say no, not last year. 2 years ago.
It was 2 or 3.
2 or 3 years ago. I watched it fairly recently.
Yeah, but and I watched it before that. But Gokaiger is such a great show. We will definitely do an episode on it at some point. But yeah. Thank you so much for sending in your email. Do you think, Swooce, do you think we would do any other Sentai or Kamen Rider?
Well, we both really like Gaim, and I think Gaim is great, even if it's not a good representation of the whole show. So if we did another rider, I think we would probably like Double or Build would probably be the best ones to do it on. Okay. And I would say we would probably do at least one more maybe at some point. I mean, the reason we would be doing Gokaiger and Gaim is because that's like both ones we both seen and both regard highly.
Right. As far as Build is concerned, I've heard it's really good.
Build and that's another one I would have to watch. Yes.
That's another one I would have to watch. I think, let's see, the Kamen Rider I've seen. We could do X-Aid at some point, but the Kamen Rider I've seen is Gaim, X-Aid, Kabuto, Wizard, and O's.
O's is really good. I really like O's.
Yeah. I think
I,
that's all I've seen.
I'd like to do a Decade episode. Unfortunately, as much as I love him, I don't know if his season would make a good show or a good episode to talk about.
Right.
I don't know. I enjoyed it, and I don't know. I feel like I have a really big bias for it. I'm not even sure if the season was a good season. It's like one of those things like you love it, but you can't remember, so you don't know if it's like actually good or not.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. I have heard like a lot of people not happy with the way the show was,
It was short.
but and specifically the way it ended. But I do know a lot of people love Tsukasa,
Yeah.
the actor and character. So I
It might
don't
be one of those
necessarily
things.
know.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I don't necessarily know how that falls in public opinion.
It
On
might be one of
where,
those
like,
things, really, though. Yeah, and speaking on that, that it probably is. He was an amazing writer, and then the show wasn't the best.
Well,
And I was
I don't
too
know if
enamored.
you-
Hmm?
Go ahead.
I was like
Sorry.
just too, and personally, I might just be too enamored with him. And it's like, oh, well, all of his bits are the important bits anyway. So if everything where he's not in it isn't good, who cares?
Right. So there was actually like a weird lawsuit that went on during Decade.
Really?
Do you know about this?
I don't.
So apparently there's this law in Japan, which I don't know if the law came about because of this instance or if it was a previously existing law and that this show violated. But regardless, there's now a law that says shows aren't allowed to end like the end of Decade, I've heard, is go see this movie to find out how it ends. But they didn't necessarily end the show with the show. So there's apparently a law that states you can't do that because the shows are on television for the kids to watch, and the parents were getting angry that the show that the kid was watching all year didn't actually end, and they have to go see a movie to figure out how it ended. But
Yeah, the ending is very awkward. I will definitely say that and in my opinion, the show never really ended. Because like every time we see Decade, it's just a continuation of his story. Whenever he shows up
Okay.
in any other media, it's just them still going on doing what they're doing.
right. Well, as far as Common Rider is concerned, I'd have to watch the series before reviewing it because I haven't seen quite a lot, and you haven't seen quite a lot of Sentai, so that would also have to be the case.
I know a Sentai though that we could do a good episode on.
You're probably gonna say Go Busters, and I agree.
I was gonna say Q Ranger, but yes, Go Busters is very good too.
I agree on both Q Ranger and Go Busters, and I don't know if you ever saw Kyoryuger, but if you haven't, that's actually a really good show too.
I
Like,
haven't.
okay, well, I remember it being really good, so I would probably have to rewatch it to really even do an episode on it.
Was that
because
the
it's been
ones
so
where the thing
long.
was the cube?
Do I?
Was that the one where the thing was the cube?
No, that was Zyuohger.
That's Zyuohger. Okay. The Zyuohger was the one with the gun,
Kyoryuger
right?
was what we used as Dino Charge.
Right, the gun batteries.
Yeah, the Gabu revolver and the Judenshi.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think we've talked long enough on this. Thank you again, Thomas, for sending in this email. And to all of you out there, if you would like to send us an email, you can do so by sending it to a2zpodcast@gmail.com.
Yep, and don't
And
forget to
please-
slap that heart, ring that ding-a-ling bell, drop us a like or a listen, and do all the fancy gubbins.
That's right. And in that email, go ahead and send us a question you would like us to answer on the podcast, and tell us in the say in the email that you're good with us reading it. I would like to have that confirmation before going and reading an email that was supposed to be private.
That's true. Yes, that's a good point. Now, just so you guys are wondering, we did ask before, because we forgot to mention, like we mentioned we might read them, but we didn't say before. But if you want it to be read or not, I actually specify that. And
Right.
it wasn't a big deal this time because
No,
we got
it's
the
not
email.
a big deal at all. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for future reference, and they Thomas definitely said, "Oh, that's cool with us reading this." But for in the future, if to prevent having to ask, if you just go ahead and say, "Oh, it's cool, go ahead, don't worry about it," that'd be much appreciated. And also follow us on Twitter at A to Z Podcast. And if you like to listen to your podcast on YouTube, go to A to Z and Ultraman Podcast, type that into YouTube, or follow the link through Anchor. Go ahead and give us a subscribe, and those podcasts will be there for you to listen to as well. And I think that's it. You got anything else, Swooce?
Remember, everybody, to stay ultra, and you just chase your dreams, because with enough determination, you can do anything.
That's right. And be sure to watch out for the next one.